Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to take the call on this Employment Relations Statutory Minimum Redundancy Entitlements Amendment Bill, and I congratulate the Labor member Sue Moroney for bringing this bill to the House. The Greens will be supporting this bill. It's a bill that will provide compassionate and necessary minimum standards for those many workers who've lost their jobs and find themselves, through no fault of their own, made redundant from their workplace. The previous speaker was incredibly stingy in his approach about this. The bill provides for 4 weeks' notice of redundancy to the worker. Now, that's really important. If a worker is about to lose their job, a job they've held for many years, say, then the more notice the better. It gives a bolster of time for the worker to be able to just start the process of looking for another job, Mr. Speaker. The bill also provides redundancy compensation of 4 weeks' pay if the worker has worked there for at least a year, and 2 weeks' pay for each extra year, up to a maximum of 26 weeks. So that means the worker would only get 26 weeks compensation if they've worked at the same place for 12 years or more. And I'm not sure if many members in this House have ever experienced being made redundant, but I can assure you it's a traumatic experience. During the recent cross-party manufacturing inquiry, which didn't include that side of the House, during the recent cross-party manufacturing inquiry, I heard an incredibly moving and brave submission from a woman in a small town who'd lost her job because the factory she worked in had to close down. She described how redundancy affected her, not just her financial stability, but also her self-esteem, which undermined her ability to confidently apply for other jobs. Not that there were many jobs available. She had to shift from the manufacturing sector, where she had worked for 17 years, into retail, and she counted herself lucky to find a job at all, since they're very scarce in New Zealand, and especially in small-town New Zealand. This woman was one of over 40,000 or so people in New Zealand in the manufacturing sector who've lost their jobs in the last 4 years. She could easily have been one of the more than 5,000 public service employees who are no longer providing public services to us. This woman was luckier than many workers who are made redundant because she belonged to a union, Mr. Bennett. She had a collective employment agreement with her employer, and so she did receive some compensation to tide her through the months that it took her to find another job in her small town. Her union had been able to bargain for those provisions. And it's worth mentioning that this will become increasingly difficult when the government introduces changes to the Employment Relations Act, which includes measures that will make it harder for workers to join a union and bargain collectively. In this type of employment relations environment that the government is fostering, it becomes increasingly important to have minimum redundancy provisions enshrined in legislation. This bill didn't come out of nowhere. Most other OECD countries have some form of rights for workers to have notice and compensation of redundancy. Many OECD countries have much better provisions for workers generally, which really does make us less of an attractive working environment for the skilled workers we desperately need to keep in New Zealand and attract to New Zealand. Without redundancy provisions, employees have less incentive to make long-term investments in their jobs, and the government is left bearing the bulk of the cost of supporting and re-establishing them into new jobs. This is a recommendation from the Public Advisory Group. There were employer representatives on that group who supported this and acknowledged that this is a basic right, that a cost to employers that they should bear. Mr. Speaker, we will be supporting this bill. Damn, I had 30 seconds.
Speaker.
Chris Ockenvold.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what interesting debates we've heard this evening. Some of them perhaps with the tongue